Good evening, everyone, and welcome to AGI's Mentor Hub. It's an initiative of Sri Amaya Public Charitable Trust, which has a group of institutions like AIMSA, Aditya Institute of Management Studies and Research, Aditya College of Architecture and Design, Aditya College of Design Studies. So under AGI Mentor Hub, we provide three levels of training pattern. At level one, where we introduce you to different career opportunities available in the industry. At level two, we connect you with industry experts who would like to speak to you on different specialization of careers you like to join. And at level three, we would like to introduce to you to subject experts, where we will training sessions on which specialization to choose. Before starting the webinar, I will request to all the participants, please keep their mic on mute and webcam off during the session. And if you have any query or doubts, you can raise that in chat box, Zoom chat box available. Uh, and the question answer session will be answered by our guest speaker at the end of the session. So for inviting our today's guest, Mr. Sri Ganesh Rajendra, I would like to request Mr. Jwalan Dave, sir, to proceed further. Over to you, sir.
Okay.
Hello. Nikhil,
Yes, sir, audible.
Sri Ganesh, can you hear me? I am audible, right?
Yeah, Jwalant, you're audible.
Hello, am I audible? Hello,
Audible, sir, audible.
Nikhil, can you please respond?
Yes, sir, audible.
Okay. I was halfway through the introduction. Okay, I'll just go, come again on it. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be having landscape architect Sri Ganesh Rajendran with us today on the AGI Mentors Hub webinar series. I would like to welcome you all to what is going to be a very interesting and insightful lecture. Let me introduce Sri Ganesh with a few sentences. He has studied his architecture from the Academy of Architecture in Mumbai and then completed his master's in landscape architecture from the School of Planning and Architecture in New Delhi. Personally, I've had the privilege to have worked with him on a number of projects and proposals, and the experience has always been one of collaborative learning and exploration through research into not only the tangible but also the many intangible layers of context that are associated with every project. Uh, from that experience, I can say that his approach to landscape is very unique in the sense that it's a very holistic one that addresses not only the very essential necessity of the built environment to respond to the natural environment which it is placed in, but also to evolve a much richer interaction between the physical and cultural contexts specific to any site and project. I would like to welcome Shri Ganesh again and request him to share some of these insights with us through his presentation today. Thank you, Shri Ganesh. Over to you.
Thank you, Jwalant. Thank you, Nikhil, and thank you, Aditya Group of Institutions, for inviting me to speak about landscape architecture. I will switch off my camera at this juncture so that I don't have a problem of bandwidth. Yeah. I'd like to begin now. My experience and exposure to landscape is related to, first and foremost, the place where I was born and I spent about 33 years of my life. This is Jeevan Bhima Nagar in Borivali. And I have climbed these trees as a child. I have plucked out the mangoes. I've swung from the roots of this banyan tree. And this is a place where the trees are older than the buildings and they are taller than them. My friends and I, childhood friends and I, we've caught snakes, caught dragonflies, identified birds, and basically we've had a great childhood in this place. A part of this childhood experience and later my time as a student of architecture and then as a visiting faculty was also related to spending and exploring Sanjay Gandhi National Park, whether it was a school picnic or a architectural studio exploration or even a landscape studio exploration. And these two places have left an indelible impression on my whole perspective as a landscape architect, and I keep going back to these places to try and see the meaning of nature and the city. Okay. The decision to study landscape architecture was, today it appears like, it was as simple as the center of a circle and all my decisions were the circumference of the circle. But in reality, it was actually a very, very long spiraling journey. I was set on the path of studying landscape architecture through an interaction with Professor Jal Arya, one of my faculty at Academy of Architecture. He himself had studied landscape architecture along with urban planning almost 50 years to that day. And he pointed me to landscape architecture in relation to a question that was bothering me. I was working on a site along with a couple of friends where we were assigned the task of setting out buildings and measuring the levels in respect to the contour levels, and then going back to the architect's office where he would update the design, and then this process would continue ad infinitum. Somewhere in the middle of that whole back and forth, we came to a very startling and very sad realization that architecture for a 5-year course and for somebody who had almost 30-40 years of experience, architecture did not find enough ways to tell how to put a building on land and how to do that in concert with the lay of the land or the environs in which the project was located. And this was very saddening. So I took Professor Jal Arya's advice seriously, and I was lucky to get selected at the School of Planning and Architecture for the master's program. There, 2 years were a very interesting journey where under Professor Shahir, who was the head of department at that time, all of us underwent a very nice journey of exploring landscape architecture. But I personally recall spending a great part of the 2 years visiting Humayun's tomb garden, which he had restored at that point of time. And after seeing it almost continuously for 2 years, I kind of started to appreciate the the limited amount of restoration, almost to a point of it being fragmented. A limited point of restoration was something I felt was very sophisticated because it left a lot of questions in the mind of somebody who would look a little closely. So he had retained controversial layers of the garden design, and he had clarified certain aspects of it. He had selectively restored the water flows and all that. And that particular impression over 2 years, made me want to do historic gardens as part of my portfolio as a landscape architect, if ever I would end up having a practice. So I came back to Bombay, and as luck would have it, conservation architect Mr. Vikas Dilavri was looking for somebody to work on the Bhavdaji Lad Museum. He had just about finished restoring it, and the outdoor required a little bit of attention. So I spent about 1 year working with him on the project in his office. But as a boss, he was very kind to allow me to stay outside of office. I spent a good deal of time on the site, and I learned to also walk around Mumbai and look at it from a conservation architect's point of view. The idea of built heritage versus intangible heritage, all those kind of debates and conversations were something I was exposed to. Thereafter, one other opportunity came my way where my love for campus planning manifested in a job with Hosmac, a healthcare planning firm. Its leader, Dr. Desai, somehow had this ability to push people into the water and make them swim on their own. So he pushed me into this ocean called campus planning, and he just watched me navigate its choppy waters with the help of senior architects in that office. And what was remarkable about these two starting experiences as a professional was that both of these offices allowed me to teach. And I found that to be very liberating because it gave me the opportunity to look beyond my desk and look at the city of Bombay from the point of view of a landscape architect. Thereafter, I also did some work as an architect along with two other partners, and then I was working with landscape architect Shilpa Chandavarkar on a couple of projects in their office. Thereafter, again, my love for campus planning pulled me out of Bombay into an IT company in Bangalore, where I got a chance to work on campus planning briefs, do a little bit of landscape retrofits in some of their campuses, and most importantly, it put me in direct contact with another landscape architect. In this instance, it was Mr. Mohan Rao. And what I'm thankful for is that he took me to a particular project of his named Hathi Gaon. And for the first time in my life, I realized that landscape architects also have clients who are not humans. So the entire project was designed for the elephants, and it left me with a sense of wonder that I have been so lucky to have been exposed to a subject which deals with things other than human requirements. Now, somewhere in between this particular journey and starting work as Ficus Landscape Architects, which is our own practice, my partner Aparna and I also had the good fortune of having very, very interesting colleagues in Bombay, one of whom introduced me or rather forced me to attend a particular talk, saying that you cancel everything else that you're doing and you come and sit for this talk by this landscape architect. You will enjoy it. And she was such a good friend that I couldn't say no, and I sat for that lecture where this landscape architect introduced a cross-section of work being done by other landscape architects of the country, and pointed out how the profession is at a cusp where things can really change and dramatically improve for the profession itself, and what are its ambiguities and its challenges. This was Mr. Aniket Bhagwat, and thereafter I have had the good fortune of being called to see some of his sites whenever I've been in Ahmedabad, and those have all been sorts of continuing education courses, whether it is interaction with Mohan or it is interactions with somebody like Mr. Aniket. Thereafter, I had set up my practice, and one of the things that I followed very consciously were two things that I learned under Mrs. Suvarna Sathe. One was respect for time, and the second was that sometimes you can do very, very simple things in a part of landscape design exposure. So that is, in a sense, the encapsulation of this whole spiral journey of mine. So this is what these were my beginnings in a profession which was completely alien to me and was introduced to me. And thereafter, I thought that it is something that I should continue for the rest of my professional career. Which then brings me to the point that,
Excuse me, Sri Ganesh sir.
yeah, the slides are coming. Don't worry.
Okay, sir.
Okay, I think something's gone horribly wrong. 1 second. Yeah. So what is it that landscape architecture as a subject is about? What is taught in it? What do we learn in it? So there are some fundamental approaches to the idea of landscape. It teaches us through the lens of liberal arts. It teaches us things about culture and history and theory behind that history. It makes us look at the ways of work of landscape architects. For example, the bearded guy on the left is Frederick Law Olmsted, the founder of the profession in a formal sense, and the pensive looking gentleman on the right is Jan McHarg. So between McHarg and Frederick Law Olmsted, there were a whole load of other ways of looking at landscape architecture, including people like Geoffrey Jellicoe or Lawrence Halprin or Roberto Burle Marx. We learned to do landscape representation. For somebody like me, the book called Landscape Graphics by Grant Reed was like a Bible, because I just couldn't draw to save my life. And we were introduced to the concepts of GIS. Now, GIS, Geographical Information Systems, is a little more embedded in landscape teaching nowadays. And there's also a lot of digital drawing related exposures that are given. But we were still at a time when hand drawings were the mode of representation. Landscape education teaches us about construction and site engineering, and some applied fields like geology and pedology, or rather geology and pedology are taught in an applied way. How to read rock structure, how to read soils and soil structure, what do you infer from them, how do they influence the work of a landscape architect, how does water move through these media, and what happens to it when it does, and so forth. There was this subject of ecology, which was also taught in a sort of interwoven manner. There were formal lectures on ecology, but we were also encouraged through, visiting faculty like Professor Ravindra Bahan, or visiting critics like Professor Prabhakar Bhagwat, to look at ecology in a little more embedded manner. And we were very lucky to have somebody like Mr. Pradeep Krishan take our batch out for 2 or 3 ecological walks, and that's when it dawned upon us that ecology cannot be taught on a blackboard or over a PowerPoint presentation. You have to go out there in the field with somebody who can point out the obvious and the not so obvious for you to be able to recognize it and what it means. Then there were instructions or exposures or even pointing towards the idea of tactic and process, the tactic of land analysis and ecological process, ecological analysis, the way of structuring space with living media or mounds or earthwork, or the whole idea of site planning or regional landscape planning. And then during theory classes with Professor Shahid, there were dialogues on idiom related to landscape, such as what is the meaning of urban nature, what is landscape urbanism, what do they mean when they say landscape as infrastructure, and so forth. So ultimately, the education of a landscape architect is about regions, cities, places, peoples, and methods. And what a landscape architect gets exposed to ultimately is the weave between all of this. And this weave is what we inherit as our starting point towards the work that we do. So I came back to Mumbai, as I had mentioned earlier, And during the time that I had, where I was just wandering around the city, the idea of drawing it up came to fore. So I started with a lot of hand-drawn maps of the city. Eventually, I kind of used GIS and other things to also draw it up. What fascinates me about Bombay is the idea of nature and the city, and the fact that it is enveloped by nature and nature actually cradles it. It's an irony that it is known for, as a concrete jungle, but if you peek through the cracks of the concrete jungle, you still see a lot of natural processes in continuation, heavily strained at the edge of breaking down, but somehow they all manage to come together. There are stories about hills being cut down and leveled, and so it is nice to try and locate them in those places and understand why certain parts of the cities flood and so forth. So, so to me, the idea of a city and a landscape will always remain Bombay, because it is also a superb example of a landscape at work. Because of this topographic difference caused by Sanjay Gandhi National Park and water bodies on both sides, the city is flushed every day with land and sea breeze. You have to just go to a place like Chennai or Kolkata to understand the importance of topography at the level of a city. Those are also coastal places, but they're extremely humid and very, very sapping in terms of their impact on microclimate. Landscape architecture also teaches us certain lessons. There are certain ironies that we come across. For example, the irony of water in Bijapur. Now, Bijapur is a Adil Shahi kingdom built between the 15th and 16th century, as everybody knows. But what is remarkable about Bijapur is its beautiful water network of bawlis and step tanks and wells, underground canals, aqueducts, which supply water across places of leisure, palaces, gardens, areas where food was grown, and areas where hunting was facilitated. So along with a team of conservation architects, when we went around mapping these water bodies, we also, from a point of view of landscape evolution or genesis, we also mapped how these water bodies grew. So from the earliest 11th century footprint onwards, all the way till the end of the 16th century, how the water bodies got built in. And the remarkable thing is that they all dovetailed into one another, and they just kind of continued the whole system. So what was the irony about all this? The irony about all this is, in a semi-arid climate like Bijapur, which is almost always on the verge of drought and is required to import water, all these water systems are full. They are filthy, they are dirty, but they're always full. And this puzzle was solved by trying to relate these things to the underlying geology. So if we observe carefully in these maps, you see a profusion of water bodies more on the top left-hand side of that circular city. So that is the strata which was the most conducive for capturing the flow of water, and that's why a lot of tanks and underground networks were all built in tandem to harvest water. And this system, built and running for over 400 years, offers us some interesting lessons on the idea of sustainable cities and the new buzzword of blue-green cities and all that. So history offers us these clues, and we just have to look for it, is what I guess is what the city like Bijapur tell us. Landscape nurture needs, whether it is growing food for our own requirements, or trying to tie the site to a larger landscape context by blurring the edge between the site and the surroundings. It meets the needs of soil related organisms, birds, small fauna, and the overall flora. Sometimes we are required to invert the notion of ground. We have to do all this on the top of roofs and podiums, which unfortunately is the de facto way of looking at landscapes in a lot of cities nowadays. Landscape design can be for the individual. It can bring in an element of scale and an element of delight through, for example, the way sunlight falls on a particular space, or how a pocket can be carved out from where you see or look at things. But at the same time, it can also do things for the collective, where sometimes with the use of historic references or allusions, the simple idea of catching water can be articulated, like in this example, where a water collection tank or a rainwater tank was designed as a kund, referencing it with the temples of Orissa, and the existing mango trees, which were one of the old land uses of the place, were retained and integrated. And this in turn became a setting between two different buildings to become a place of cultural exchange and informal and formal events. What I have learned about landscape architecture is also that it has a focus beyond humans, and it is something that becomes a responsibility to tackle. We were very fortunate to work on projects like that, as in this case, where this particular site has a very interesting history. Today it is a resort. A few years ago it was a coffee estate, where these trees that you see were planted to shade the coffee crops. And those trees were actually planted by cutting the original or the native forest that grew there. So when this site stopped producing coffee and the owner converted into a resort, it gave us the opportunity to try and bring back wilderness in some form. And through a lot of simple, literally invisible gestures, we blended these requirements of moving around the site, and the siting of buildings were handled in a certain manner. And then wilderness was slowly allowed to creep in this particular place. We also value experiences over expressions. So you will find in the work of a lot of landscape architects that the expressions are very, very simple. And the idea behind it is to make the person using that space or walking through that space experience something which is far greater. So learning from the kind of professionals that I have interacted with and I have met with, this is the importance of, looking at other people's work, I guess. So we learned how to do simple things. For example, the kind of trail that is required to connect a 50-meter level difference between the top of a hill and the bottom of a hill, which opened out into an estuary and a pristine beach. So in the rains, all of this becomes green and those laterite bands stand out, whereas in the dry season, the green grass on it comes up. So the grasses were all plucked from here and there, and they were just planted, and some of the vegetal thickets were, deliberately multiplied and replanted to increase a bit of vegetal cover there. A lot of the work of landscape architects deals with the placement of buildings and roads today. Though projects call upon an architect to do these things first, it is usually in the realm of landscape architecture that the actual fitting of these happen. And this is an important role that we play, because sometimes the idea of putting the buildings on ground lightly, as in the illustrative plan on the left, converts into a reality on the right hand side, where the footprints and the road patterns completely erase the underground topography, like the way the model shows. So you see a lot of rectilinear geometry now superimposed on the land in the form of cut and fill to meet grade and slope requirements, whereas those organic looking lines which denote the natural contours are either completely erased or they are limited to certain pockets. And this becomes troublesome at a later point when we are trying to do something with the landscape design. The profession is also equipped to integrate and hide or conceal things in the manner of infrastructure systems. And a lot of landscape architects work very closely with MEP consultants to kind of differentiate the corridors for infrastructure and the corridors for soil function, whereby tree roots, soil fungi, groundwater, all of that can find nice corridors to kind of retain their natural flows. The work also entails trying to stitch fragmentation. So we literally work with architects and urban designers by finding cause to nudge their buildings create continuities between open space patches, and overall try to find some cohesion in the entire composition of open space. Sometimes this can also help in defining different types of micro habitats on the site depending on the site context, but almost always it allows the creation of blue and green linkages which preserve green cover links and like I said earlier, so, moisture flow links in the overall site. And this is regardless of scale of the site. At the interface of urban design, landscape architecture tries to find purpose and meaning to that white area which has a very, very ambiguous name called open space. So as typology, open space goes into roads, it goes into maidans, gardens, parks, plazas, connector streets, and so forth. But what is the larger purpose and how does this install meaning into an urban form is something which is a puzzle that all landscape architects grapple with. The subject teaches us to read risk and read significance. These snapshots are of a site which, if you see the central image with the rock sample, it clearly indicates that this land emerged from the sea about a few million years ago. So what is the consequence of that? The consequence is that the soils are extremely saline, barely anything grows beyond a certain extent on the site, and as it goes closer and closer to the sea, it becomes more and more rocky and almost impossible to have any kind of cultivation or culture. So how do you, the work of landscape architects then helps in redirecting and, restructuring the development that is intended on the line. Our work can give structure to, the overall urban form by trying to look at underground patterns. In the case of this, where underground water system actually becomes the basis for structuring the land uses that lie on top of it, and overall try to blend amenity and ecological function as a part of the landscape design and urban structure exercise. We also excavate, inquire, and restore historic gardens and try to understand why landscapes vanish or gardens vanish. This is one of the cases where through such processes, along with the conservation architect, 3 different historic layers of a garden were excavated and unearthed.
Excuse me, sir. Sorry to interrupt. We left with few seconds to end this first part of the session. It is
okay.
requested to all the participants to continue with the session. Please use same coordinates, same login details.
Okay. So I also have to log in separately, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So are we doing that right now?
Yes, sir. Within few seconds.
Okay. So I'll stop.
Thank you, sir.